Hello and welcome to the Rabblecast. My name is Eric Hernandez, and it is hot in this room, so we're going to try to keep this short and sweet. I'm here along with,
Doug.
for anybody who doesn't know, this is take two, because apparently you can't swear at the beginning of a show within 30 seconds, otherwise the algorithm goes, nope. So we're going to try to avoid that one for the time being. With that said, this episode has a grab bag of different things. We do it once again, where we talk about some of the delays, we go back to the writer's strike, the actor's strike, and then somehow, blame me, but somehow we end up delving into sex dolls, comedy. It all comes together in a way that makes sense. And then from there,
Yeah.
roll on to horror movies and other stuff. And Doug brings up a very, very interesting point as far as horror movie, and one in particular, the history of a horror movie. We'll leave it in the episode itself. That was pretty
Yes.
much it, right?
That and a little bit of Joe Bob Briggs for you late night folks from the 1990s.
Absolutely. There you go. So what more can you ask for? We
hmm
are brought to you by InsidePulse.com. You can find us under the podcast section. Make sure you check us out over on YouTube, youtube.com/Rabblecast. Check out the site where the show gets posted all the time, because that's where it lives and breeds, rabblecast.libsyn.com. Check out our Facebook fan page. Send us a tweet at Rabblecast, because we haven't found out what to call it yet past that. And email us, rabblecast@gmail.com. I want things to read. I want things to look at. Pictures, stories, comments, feedback. Let me know. And do me a favor. If it's okay to read on air, mark okay to read. Because sometimes I want to share something and I don't know if I'm allowed to read it, because I don't want to call somebody out. Just saying. With all that, I can't think of anything else. How about you? Anything else to add?
No, I've got it's sweltering where you are, and we're having a hell of a thunderstorm over here.
Okay, so before he loses power, we got to go. That's about it. Let's get into it. Enjoy the show.
And the Rabblecast is back.
Alrighty, settle in. It's becoming a sweatbox already. I can feel it. Uh, one day I hope we can get back to when we had like a dedicated room and we could sit down at a table. Remember the one time I think it was around like October. We sat down. Jimmy was with us. It was in Jimmy's studio, or yours in Jimmy's studio, depending on how you want to look at it.
It was
And
Jimmy's studio. Let's break it down.
just, just saying. Um, what we were doing, I think we did like a Hinterkaifeck at the time for your horrible
Oh
events in
yeah.
history, and we had the
Oh yeah.
lights turned down low. There was, I don't know if Jimmy had like some like little glow going on in the room of like candles, whatever it was. I can't remember specifically, but it was a nice tone down. It set the atmosphere, set the mood, and it was nice and cool. It wasn't cold, wasn't warm, just comfortable.
Yeah, because it was a pleasant autumn day in central New Jersey.
Yeah, I want to get back to that like all the time.
Well, give it another couple weeks, and we should be getting it. I hope, but we just set record highs, and it's the second week of September. So you tell me what the fuck is going on.
See, I'm used to this time of year because, truth be told, my birthday is at the end of the month. So during my month, as you can say, my birth month, I'm used to things being cooler, a little bit more rain, a little damp. As we start getting into the fall season, because although school has opened again here in Jersey, it's not the end of summer just yet. We still have like another few weeks before the official end of summer.
Yep.
So I'm just used to having that transition into the fall season, and it's my favorite because I've grown up enjoying it for so long. But right now, like today and the past 2 days at work, when I've left the building to just escape the nonsense, escape all the politics and everything else. When I leave the building, I want to get some fresh air. I want to get a nice breeze. I want to get some sunshine. But fuck, have I been getting beaten down by the heat? I'm just like, God damn.
Yep.
What is happening?
It's we're having a heat wave.
Yes, very much so. And if I remember correctly, earlier today I was checking out weather reports, and they're saying one of the other hurricanes is charting through the Atlantic and heading up northwest, but it's going to go more northward, so it's just like going to skim past our coastline, essentially, at least the outer stretches of it. So I'm hoping that brings some more rain, some more relief. At the very least, I hope it's not going to bring us more humidity and more after the rain stops. You know, if you know what I'm saying, that sticky feeling you get when you go outside.
Yeah, I know it. Oh yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I can just, like I said, I can feel the heat begin to mount as I'm sitting here. So for anybody who's wondering, since we've come back, this room, which is one of the studios in the past, it gets really, really hot in the summer, and it gets really, really cold in the wintertime. And there's just no in between, unfortunately, unless we're in the fall or spring seasons. So trying to make do as best we can.
Yep.
On the news front, there really isn't much going on. I mean,
news is good news, man.
Well, I would say there's a few stories here and there, but just the way things have been going recently, it's just like with the writers and actors on strike, pop culture is kind of like slowed down a little bit. I mean, yeah, there's other things rumbling on. The newer stuff can't be promoted, can't be talked about on talk shows because there aren't any. And now we're starting to see delays. Have you heard about these?
No. Why don't you tell me about them?
The current slate of delays has been hitting the Disney slate. And when I say Disney, that's I realize it's a wide range now. It reaches pretty darn big because Disney owns just about every darn thing.
The mouse's tentacles go deep.
Yes, they do. Let's see if I can just pull up the list that we're talking about earlier. I was trying to dig through a few different things to find a few talking points for tonight, and it's unless you want to talk about impending trials and the insurrection of the country, that seems to be the main thrust of the news cycle recently.
I think we would do good to avoid, unless we're looking at a very specific concentrated thing. I think it would be better if we avoid politics.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. Let's see here. Echo, the spin-off from the Hawkeye show. Echo also permanently dealing with Daredevil and Kingpin from the Daredevil series. That will be delayed. It was supposed to be November of this year. So right around the same time we're getting the Marvels in the theaters, they're going to delay Echo into January of 2024.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Let's see what else is going here. Come on, give me the rest of it. It's being stingy. Echo gets delayed. Of course, as it loads, it's being a pain in my ass.
Shit.
That happens.
Well, these things happen.
The other subjects to the change include highly anticipated Daredevil Born Again, which suffered production halts due to the ongoing strikes, has now been taken off the release schedule indefinitely.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, that's a little worrisome. The reboot of the 90s animated X-Men series, X-Men 97, a continuation from what was originally X-Men 96, and WandaVision, WandaVision spin-off, Agatha, I guess it was like Coven of Chaos originally, or House of Harkness. Now they're
going to do that whole thing of Agatha Harkness and her story. Catherine Hahn, I think that is.
Yes. Well, it was House of Harkness first, kind of like a callback to House of M. Coven of Chaos, because they love alliteration. And now it's being called the Darkhold Diaries, which I don't mind. But that one, unfortunately, has also been taken off the release schedule for the time being. I mean, look, people are getting a little worried, saying, oh, they might be canceling projects. They haven't canceled anything yet. The biggest thing is, like we said, the strike has been ongoing since, May for the writers, then June or July for the actors.
I think it was July.
Okay. So that's going to keep pushing on, and if anything, what this signals is some of the studios are foreseeing this going on longer than anticipated, and that is people were hoping that maybe 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, maybe this will finish up. Not very likely. You know, these
No.
kind of things are going to take time. The studios apparently are still being pains in the asses. They're not willing to really negotiate. They're just saying, here are our terms. If you don't like them, go screw. And then the actors and writers are going, well, we're going to go back to the picket lines. And the cycle continues. So I've already started reading stories and headlines that a lot of people, especially on the West Coast, are starting to look for living assistance or rent assistance because evictions are going to start mounting. If you don't have money coming in, you can't pay rent and you can't pay bills, and who knows what's going to happen there. In fact, earlier today, I was catching up on some podcasts, and Kevin Smith at the end of September is going to be doing a show down in the Atlantic Highlands at his new theater, the Smod Castle Theater. But before one of his shows, they're going to do an auction. And he's actually going to be auctioning off a lot of his own personal collection.
Collection of what?
Comics. Whether it be comic books, signed pieces, posters, comic book pages, original artwork, stuff like that. And it's not because he himself is suffering from the strike. Far from it. In fact, he's trying to do everything he can to mitigate that effect. But apparently he's recently moved houses. So he had a larger house, which apparently used to be owned by Ben Affleck at one point. He bought it off of Ben Affleck. He still refers... Funny enough, he said he lived in the home for about 20 years, but he still referred to it as Ben Affleck's home.
That's kind of hilarious.
So, but they're downsizing to a smaller home. His daughter's moved out on her own. I guess the in-laws were living with him for a little while. They're out in their own situation, whatever the case is. But he figured, okay, before I had a lot of wall space, before I had a lot of storage space. Now, rather than just sticking everything into a storage unit, screw it. Just sell it. Let everybody else enjoy it at this point, because what am I going to do with it? It's fun to collect it and amass it. But once it gets to a certain size, what are you going to do with it, you know?
Yeah, you just look at it.
Partly, yeah. Suddenly your collection owns you, and that's no fun.
Mm-hmm.
You have to maintain it, make sure everything's okay, you know, in certain cases, temperature control, whatever the case is. He figured, why not? I have my own place now as far as a entertainment venue. Do an auction. I can't remember. He's holding some kind of like auction house online. It's like hosting all the duties of going online and bidding for it, whatever the case is. But if you go to the show at the end of September at his theater, you also have a chance on bidding other stuff over there. And every now and then he'll throw stuff in, props from the different movies he's been in, props from other movies that people have given to him sometimes. And it just, again, just a fun time all around. So we'll make a little extra money coming in. I can imagine him, especially now that he decided to buy a movie theater with some friends, is feeling the crunch a little bit himself with the writers and actors guilds suddenly, you know, not being able to promote the different movies or projects. Because he's trying to find something. And for an independent theater, if you're not part of the chain system for movies, it's a little bit harder and harder to sell tickets. So I can imagine that also playing into it a little bit. And he wants to make sure he shores that end up as well. Because now, let's face it, he has a movie theater, a comic book shop. I mean, fuck, I should approach him about opening up an arcade. And you have a nice
that's not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea. It would go hand in hand with the rest of the production. So yeah,
you never know. We'll see. But no, it's again with everything going on right now. We reported on a while back that somebody in the studio system decided to say, you know, we're going to hold out until people start losing their homes, people start getting kicked out of their apartments, and then they're going to start crawling back to make a deal. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. But it was just as despicable, the sentiments that were stated during this whole thing. And now we're starting to see that. So the question is, are the actors and the writers going to, you know, cave in and say, screw it, we need to make money, we need to put a roof over our heads. Some of them have families, especially some of the workers, because let's face it, it's not just actors, not just writers, but everybody who's involved to make these movies are also suffering because of a production shut down. Hair and makeup isn't working, lighting, director photography, all these people who normally would, you know, help out in sets, your key grips, your sound guys, all these people now are suddenly out of work as well. All of them are like, well, fuck, what do I do in the meantime?
Mm-hmm.
I've been hearing a lot of writers who, don't have any writing chores to do currently, or if, some of the people who are trying to be a little proactive, they'll be writing like side projects that hopefully one day, once things pick back up, maybe they'll pitch to different studios or different networks and see if anybody will jump on those. But that's more like independent work. But some people have gone back to doing comedy, which is kind of funny.
Oh, really?
You wouldn't think of it, but sometimes the writers' rooms employ a bunch of comedians because, for the most part, you would think that comedians know what's funny. Now, I know you and I have had this subject of conversation before where it's very subjective to you what's funny and what's not.
Of course. Yeah.
So a comedian might have different ideas, might have different premises they can bring to television. I remember when Whitney Cummings, a very prominent comedian, she got her own television deal. I think it was like NBC or something like that. It was the Whitney Show. And it did okay. I remember watching it a couple times, and it was funny for what it was. But she's definitely a funnier comedian than a television star.
Okay.
So the sitcom situation, it's a different animal altogether. On stage, in front of a live audience, she can do and say whatever the hell she wants. In fact, if anybody hasn't seen the one comedy special where she has a sex doll replica of herself made, it's actually a robot with her face.
Okay.
And it actually comes out, I think that she referred to it as like Whitney 2.0 or something. Oh, no, excuse me. At one point, she named it Bear Claw.
Bear Claw?
Bear Claw, as in like the pastry.
That's what I was about to say, like a pastry?
It was a funny moment. At one point, you can find the bloopers online where she was actually like working through the material because the robot's not very on point when it comes to the punchlines or to the subject material. So she's got to work with what she has, and it gets kind of weird sometimes. But the whole idea of this one was she got fascinated with sex dolls. She went to go visit one of the shops. She saw what they did, how they made the parts, how everything came together, as they did the molding for the latex masks and the face and everything. And then one of the guys at the shop goes, if you want, we can make one of you. And she, what the fuck? Seriously? She goes, yeah. So they did a one of Whitney Cummings of her face, and they put it on one of their dolls, and then she took it home. And the guy she was engaged to at the time apparently got really, really freaked out about the whole thing. Like, I don't know, it looks like you, but it's not you, and it's got like this weird uncanny valley thing going on, and it's just got this 1,000-yard stare that won't go away. And then occasionally it speaks, and it's really fucking weird.
Yeah, if I wasn't ready for that, that would weird me out, I think.
Imagine your partner, who you love, you enjoy, whatever the case is, you're very close together, you know each other very intimately, physically, whatever the case is. They invite you over one day, and all of a sudden you walk in, and on the couch is a doll with her face on it. And you're just like, what the fuck? And then it speaks.
Well, yeah.
And suddenly things go really south really fast. At one point, she even said, like, in the special, I'm not giving away too much. This is like early on in the show. She says, I half expected, when I went on one of my business trips to come home and find out like he'd been like going to town on it. He goes, no, I can't get anywhere near that damn thing. It looks fucking creepy. So I don't know.
Would you fuck a sex doll?
Would I?
Yeah.
I don't know, to be honest.
Okay.
I see. I am of the opinion that just about anything in life, I'd say, don't knock it till you try it, or try it at least once before you form an opinion, negatively or positively, whatever the case is. But I've never been presented with that circumstance, so I couldn't say yes or no either way.
Okay.
I'm trying to think. I know
I'm not sorry I put you on the spot.
No, not at all. I'm just trying to think, like, do I want to share, or do I not overshare kind of thing? But let's face it, after doing the show for so long, some things are going to come out. I mean, I know not just with my wife, but with girlfriends in the past, toys have been used in the bedroom. Mm-hmm. That's become like almost like a commonplace thing in certain relationships. But even certain friends, when I talk to them, I say, "Do you guys use toys in the bedroom?" No, we would never do that. That kind of takes away from it. I'm like, nah, not really.
Well, I think everybody's got to find a comfort point with that kind of thing. So some people are cool with it, some people are not comfortable with it.
Exactly. Like there's certain things I guess you can enjoy. I know Jen's gone to like what do they refer to them now? Well, now I guess they're just sex toy parties, but back in the day they used to refer to them as like Tupperware parties.
Yeah.
So,
which is hilarious. For the longest time, I thought it was a Tupperware party. Like, oh, they're going to go buy Tupperware. Huh, whatever.
See, I was confused for the longest time because my mom, when I was growing up, my mom was an Avon lady.
Yeah.
And every now and then she'd go out for Avon parties. And for a while there, I was like, is my mom a sex freak? I was confused because I'm like, wait, are you actually selling Avon or are you selling something out? Like, is there a part of the catalog I have not seen yet? It was like Avon After Dark. I wasn't entirely sure.
Yeah, well, in the front they have the entire section where it's like, okay, here's your actual Tupperware, and here's some other stuff, and in the back here's your butt plugs and your vibrating gadgets and your motion lotion and your edible underwear and all the high points of the 1990s sex trade.
It's kind of like back in the day if you were at the mall and you were at Spencer's and you walk in and you're like, here's your blacklight posters, here's your funny little like, shirts and tchotchkes, here's your over the hill greeting cards, birthday cards, whatever the case is, and then you get to the back and it's like the sexy lingerie, the edible underwear. You're like, what the fuck am I looking at?
Yeah, but it was all like really hokey stuff, like the kind of stuff you buy for like a bachelor party, like the penis straws and like the wacky shit like that. Like,
yeah,
it's all like cheap plastic shit. Yeah, for bachelorette parties.
But the funny thing is, over at the mall by us now, we went there recently, and I think it's still Spencer's. They've changed like their whole aesthetics of the store.
Yeah.
And we walked in, and on the back wall, here's the front entrance, and then as you get to the back wall from that entrance, you look there, they actually have vibrators, butt plugs, and I'm like, really?
Oh wow, they're going next level.
They've stepped up their game. I was like, holy shit.
Oh, right
okay. And then they have like, different like shot glasses with a naked lady or a phallic shaped symbol on a greeting card, whatever the case is. They've branched out as far as what they're willing to sell, which, hey, nowadays it's fine. I guess you just go in there, have fun, make sure you don't let your kids just run in freely because they'll come out with something weird and they're going to ask you questions. But
yep.
It was just one of those things. I was like, okay. And you're right. Anybody who goes in there, you could still, let's say, get somebody a vibrator as a gag gift, depending on what kind of gag you're talking about. But you can give it as a gift, and somebody will be, either they're blushing, go, oh my god, I never thought of this, blah blah, or they're like, oh yeah, cool, the batteries in mine just ran out. You'd never know what you're going to get nowadays. But
nope.
Yeah, it's so going back to your original question. I don't know. I couldn't answer that one because I've never really seen a sex doll that doesn't creep me out.
Okay.
I've read stories of guys who have, intimate relationships with their sex dolls, and even stories where people actually marry their sex dolls.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, I've heard about that.
Those are interesting ones because I've also seen the subject of said articles. Sometimes it's like a nerdy looking guy who probably doesn't get out that much, probably awkward in social situations. But I've also seen a few of them that are like, big jack guys that for whatever reason just prefer the doll over their real counterpart. So it's like, okay, kind of interesting, kind of weird. But I remember reading stories when they were first. So the subject of Bear Claw, her type of, I guess it's called a real doll.
Yeah. Was
the name for it. Those types of sex dolls, when they were put into conventions as for demos or promotional displays, they would find that unfortunately the demo displays would get abused a fair amount when they would let the clients have some private time with them. And it's just shit. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to have a sex doll and you're going to be at a convention, you're going to say, hey, check it out. But you would also say, here's, close the curtain and enjoy some time with it a little bit. I don't know what the fuck these people were doing with them. I don't know whether they were destroying the latex that made the bodies and the faces or the internal mechanisms. But some of these were just getting destroyed, and they were like, you know what? We can't even repair the demo units. Just fucking take them apart. They're done.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
You start delving into the darker depths of mankind, what they can do with something when they're like, oh, you're not being watched, do whatever you want. Kind of weird.
It's a good test to see how civilization works in some of those cases like that. So
it's just a reminder that we are dirty, nasty animals, and left unattended we can do horrible things.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd like to think if I saw a demo model of a sex doll, I don't think I'd be, trying to get down with the thing because, number one, it's not mine. Number two, who else has been using it? Number three, it becomes a giant sanitary issue.
You would like to think that they took care of it in between, like you and I have talked about in the past, off microphone, different stories. In fact, there was the one chair that made its rounds to different kink parties and different kink events. And if that one tentacled chair was not properly maintained, it was very questionable what people were doing with it.
Oh, yeah.
I'm speaking vaguely. So for anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, somebody actually made a Kraken chair. So picture, if you will, a throne with many tentacles. And, people got creative with it. That's fine. But the problem with that is if you don't clean it, if you don't take care of it, between uses and shows, sanitary is one, STDs are another. Let's just say it was a novel idea at first. And as each show progressed, you're like, yeah, maybe don't get near that thing.
Yeah, I would not monkey around with that thing unless I had an opportunity to do. I don't even know what the hell I'd clean that with. I'd see at that time it's like going to be like
fire
soap and water. Well, soap and water, Capicide, then more soap and water, I think. So
a UV light to kill everything that's on there.
Actually, that would be a good idea too. Well, Capicide is what hospitals use to kill everything. It kills pretty much every virus, including and up to HIV, HPV, and all strains of hepatitis.
See, the funny thing is, as we're talking about this, I'm having a echo in my brain recently. And This is back when you and I were first firing this back up, where my son discovered the YouTube channel.
Okay.
And I just hear in the back of my head, Dad, you have a YouTube channel? Can I listen to it?
It's like, hell no.
Can you skip this episode, please? Why? Just trust me. Skip it for a while, a little over 10 years, come back to it, you'll understand. Yeah, we'll talk about games, we'll talk about movies, we'll talk about different things, pop culture and everything else. But when we get to this subject, it's just like, I don't know how much I can say without it coming to bite me back in the ass later on in life. So we'll see.
Yeah.
As I say all this, hi, Kelly, how are you? I'm sure she's going to be listening like, oh, really? But yeah, go back to watch I can't remember the name of I'll look it up real fast since we're going back and forth on this subject. But the Whitney Cummings special, it came out, I want to say like 3 years ago at this point.
Okay.
And it was on Netflix, and overall pretty damn funny. But again, I don't know if people like Whitney Cummings. Sometimes when I say a female comedian, people will have different opinions, whatever the case is. Let's see, Whitney Cummings special. Because, again, we went through the different list of comedians that we would enjoy. If you say Dave Chappelle, nowadays it's kind of divisive. Some people like him. Some people think that he's a little political or woke or whatever the case is. Okay, so if anybody's looking for it, it's actually came out 2019. It's Whitney Cummings, Can I Touch It? Very apt for the sex doll.
And it came out, and that was on Netflix, right?
Correct.
Okay.
In fact, the thumbnail that I'm looking at right now, she's standing there in her outfit with her denim jacket, and when they cart Bear Claw out on the stand that she stands on, she's dressed exactly like Whitney is dressed and has the same hairdo. So it's kind of like, okay, kind of weird, but again, they also they peel the face back to show you the mechanisms and the robotics of it. And
Weird.
It's a really fucking freaky way to look at it, but I was like, all right, it is a machine. It's just got a weird latex covering over it. So whatever the case is, but if you want to go even further, go to online. They have different videos for it for real dolls. When she was researching this, she found out all the different things they do, and they have multiple eyeballs, so you can pick the eye colors, the shape of the eyes, whatever the case is. Breast sizes, they just have like a wall of breasts tacked to their wall. It looked like somebody just like did flaying of different bodies and just put the skin on the wall. The different tones for skin tones, all that stuff is just, they have little like displays or kits to show you the various different sizes, the shapes, whatever you want to make it as, because if you're going to order these, apparently you can customize them. So all these different options are available, and of course, as you add different things, the price tag goes up and up and up and up. But apparently
you can even get the orifices on the doll vibrate.
Yes.
And Whitney, I've gone through the website a few times looking at like all the bells and whistles.
Okay, so there you go. And Whitney just said, "Fuck it, just throw everything in there, and it's great for the gag." She had fun with it, but I don't know. Like what was the other one I found? There was a news article of a woman. I don't know if she was a model or she just had like pictures on social media, and she's a very attractive lady. Come to find out that somebody stole her likeness and actually made a sex doll out of her, but never contacted her, never got her permission. Now these images of her, this likeness of her, and if you see them side by side, you're like, yeah, absolutely, this is somebody took inspiration or flat out copied her look and made it into a doll. But now she has to live with the fact that now people have contacted her saying, "Did you know they made a doll out of you?" And she goes, "What the fuck?" And she's pursued legal routes to try to stop them from making it, but nothing has been said or nothing's come of it. So that's a shady thing where if somebody steals your likeness for artwork or for any creative purpose, and they don't give you credit or they don't give you a cut of whatever's going on, it's kind of shitty. And in this case, if people are going to be ordering a sex doll of you, again, whatever they're doing with it behind closed doors, it's kind of fucked up. And they bought it. Maybe they didn't know it was based off of a real person, but still, it's kind of freaking weird. The other story I remember, before the sex dolls were really like a thing that were catching on, a lot of adult actresses were getting molds of their genitalia made.
Oh yeah.
And those are being sold online. I'm like, okay, I guess, like if you can't be with the person that you're into, at the very least have a copy of them in some shape or form. And just have that one, I guess, if you're not in a relationship with them, or if you're just that much of a fan of their work. I don't know. That one's kind of weird. But then again, we're dealing with making a facsimile of somebody's body parts so that you may pleasure yourself.
But usually when they do those, at least the porn star in question is involved in it, because obviously they have to get cast.
Yes.
But also for that one, you'd like to think that, okay, at least maybe they're receiving some type of licensing fee or, a cut of the sales, or I don't know how those deals are structured. But I'd like to think they're getting some type of financial compensation, though, unlike this whole thing where they copied the face and slapped it on the doll.
And that's the other thing, because we're dealing with the adult industry, which is always like, anybody brings it up, it's kind of like a topic people shy away from because they're not mature enough to talk about it, or they're too ashamed to talk about it. And if we're dealing, especially with, let's say, anybody who's raised Catholic. Like, immediately the shame comes into play. Like, oh, I don't want, that's something that's private between a man and a woman. You're not supposed to talk about that. Let's face it, it's an adult industry, so it's business related. Somebody's making money off of these. Somebody doesn't have
Absolutely.
the I'm trying to think of the word, the different hesitations or inhibitions to say, oh, we can't sell that or we can't do that. And they're like, oh, fuck it. Literally, they're gonna fuck it. Just make it.
Yeah, figuratively and literally.
Yeah, they don't care as long as somebody's making cash out of it. Yeah, like you said, they get an adult film star, signs her name. She might have like a brand or a series of sex toys. They make them and they put them out there. But because people get a little weird about this kind of thing, they don't want to bring it up. They don't want to talk about it. It's kind of like when a new format is being chosen. Like for us back in the day, it was HD DVDs or Blu-ray DVDs, which is the format that was going to catch on. This is like, back in the further VHS and Betamax. Which format is going to be the one that the industry chooses? Well, usually the adult film industry is the one who chooses, because whichever one they decide to go with, the rest of the industry follows suit. They don't want to admit that freely, but you'll have that moment where both versions are being offered, and you make a choice, and whatever choice you pick, good luck to you. Blu-ray, for anybody who doesn't know, caught on, and that's the one who, took the race, mostly because the adult film industry said, hey, let's put all our stuff on Blu-ray, more storage space, more stuff, more Easter eggs, whatever the case is. You can put a lot more on there as far as extras. And that's what it was for a while. But now, even that's gone away now since everything's gone digital. So,
yeah.
But yeah, it's weird how it's like the dirty little secret of the industry, where they really don't want to talk about it, but they do take into account what they do, how they go about certain things, and how they follow suit in certain ways. Past that, they're like, oh no, we don't watch that. Oh no, we don't check my browser history. But everybody, let's face it, like everybody nowadays, especially if you have access to the internet, everybody's viewed or looked at or downloaded some kind of porn at some point or another. In fact, again, as I'm saying this, I'm a little concerned because I have two kids who have access to tablets and they watch videos and funny stuff online. But anytime something can slip into that stream or that algorithm, and suddenly they'll have something in front of them that they're not entirely prepared for, or we have not prepared them for. And that gets a little weird sometimes. So, not adult film industry. I'll shift over a little bit in this subject. Again, my son is a big fan of Spirit Halloween and animatronics and all the little scary stuff that jump out. This time of year, especially because of all the different videos of people reviewing the animatronics, going to the stores, checking things out. Home Depot's putting out stuff now. Lowe's has stuff. Because of all this upswing in Halloween decorations, the algorithm is latching on to a bunch of different scary videos. And some of them are like Slender Man or horror video games. And some stuff does reference like slasher films. So Michael Myers, Jason, Freddy Krueger. And recently our son couldn't sleep. And when we asked him why, he goes, oh, I was watching some videos and I saw some scary stuff. And it's like, all right, well, we've told you if you see something that's scary, one, it's not real, so don't worry about it. And two, maybe you shouldn't be watching those videos by yourself, especially at night. Like, don't
exactly
get off of those channels. You don't have to sit there and watch the whole video. But I get it as well, because it's that morbid curiosity, especially when you're that young. Sometimes like the curiosity overwhelms your sense to not look at it.
Yeah.
So he's going to be subject to a few things. Again, I've said it before, and I have no shame in admitting it. Growing up, I was a wuss when it came to horror movies. I had two older brothers who had friends over all the time. I was subjected to nights where they would be watching with friends Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, and I would run fucking terrified from the living room late nights because here I'm watching, the Dream Warriors, with the one kid, his veins are popped out of his arms, and Freddy's, using him as a marionette to walk out the window of the hospital.
Oh, yeah.
That fucking terrified me as a kid. Or Johnny Depp's character in the first Nightmare on Elm Street, when he gets sucked into the bed and suddenly the blood comes shooting out. Like, I didn't know what the fuck I was watching. My brain wouldn't even allow the thought of, no, this isn't real. It's a movie. Movies are make pretend.
Yeah.
Now I appreciate them a lot more. I can see the behind the scenes. I appreciate how they're shot. I appreciate the practical effects versus the digital effects. Stuff like that when they do those different things. Was it Dream Warriors again, where Freddy opens his shirt and you see all the faces of the people like pushing through the skin or the latex wall that they made?
Yeah, it's all the souls he's consumed, I believe.
I wasn't sure if it was Dream Warriors or the Dream Child.
I'm pretty sure it was Dream Warriors.
Okay, but yeah, all the stuff like that. When you see these weird effects, and somebody probably had like a weird acid trip, and like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? And they go about and they make a weird effect that captures that idea or captures that image. And unfortunately, he's catching some of these online. Not of the older stuff, thankfully, but they'll do, like, he might catch one of the trailers online, because those were, deemed fit for public consumption, or somebody just does like an homage to something, and then he'll watch that and gets freaked out. Like, for a while, I think I mentioned it before here, he knew what Chucky was, and the one time we went to Spencer's, they had a Chucky up on the shelf, very high up, and as we're walking into the store, he froze and he goes, "I'm not going in there." I'm like, "Why?" And he wouldn't tell us at first, but when you look up, like, oh, the Chucky doll's just like sitting there smiling at him.
Oh, geez, yeah.
So yeah, it's understandable. He hasn't seen the movie, but he gets the idea. He gets the premise, and he's not wrong. It is something that can freak you out. So not for everybody. And I had to deal with it growing up. I learned how to go through it. In fact, what was I know I always ask you because I always forget. I finally saw the documentary, the Red, White, and it was the one.
Oh, God damn it. Red, White, and God damn it. Red, White, and Horror, I think it is.
Something like that, yeah. On your recommendation, I checked it out one night, and it's a great freaking documentary. I loved it. But I can imagine if I watched that when I was in my younger years, I would have been terrified of that documentary alone, especially since they're presenting it in the behind the scenes, and I'm like, oh shit, it is real. But again, it's September. We're starting out the new month. We're starting to get into the spooky season, so a bunch of different things are going to be coming out. It's funny because we saw a lot of these different animatronics start to pop up in like mid to early August, and people are getting upset, like, "Oh my god, you can't be putting out Halloween stuff yet." I'm like, "Yeah, they can. It's a business. They're gonna want to make as much money as they can." A lot of the Spirit Halloween stores around the area started opening up slowly but surely. The local one for us had a sign on it for the longest time saying opening soon, and I think this week they finally opened up, and my sister-in-law took our oldest out for a little date, and they had fun. They checked out a bunch of different things, so he's all excited. He's got his Halloween costume. He picked up a few different things. He got a keychain of one of his favorite little animatronics. Just cool stuff. So he enjoys it. He knows what it entails. The Halloween season's coming up. Trick-or-treating, bag of candy, bag of chocolates, whatever the case is. He's very much looking forward to that. So, is there anything horror-wise coming out that you're aware of? I mean, I know we talked about Slaughterhouse. We never really went back to that one.
Yeah, I'm waiting for that on video. There's nothing really that's blowing my mind. Like, I'm not even really up to date with what's going on, to be honest with you. I've been kind of off in my own little world, which is not uncommon for me, especially these days. Yeah, I honestly don't know. I know they're doing another Exorcist movie. I'm kind of indifferent towards that, to be honest with you. Exorcist is not exactly my franchise. Yeah, I'm really not 100% sure.
All right, let's see. I'm looking up the because I'm pretty sure Slaughterhouse. I can't remember. It's only been a couple of weeks already, and I can't remember the release date of Slaughterhouse. Let's see. This one came out. Oh, I didn't see this. The tagline for this one: "Don't rush, die slow." God bless him.
Oh well, we do at the end of the month. We do have Saw 10 coming out, aka Saux.
That's right. And you know what? It's funny because is Jigsaw still the bad guy? Because I saw the trailer for that one, and I'm like, he's kind of the hero in this one.
So as I remember, I think I'm not a big fan of the Saw franchise. You have to talk to Holly Ween about that one. She's really into those. I saw a couple of them and I was very whatever towards them. But I believe that Saw 10 is actually supposed to be set between Saw 1 and Saw 2.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I think it's like they're playing around with the timeline.
Oh, I didn't catch that. Okay, that sounds interesting.
Hmm.
I can't find the information on this one for Slaughterhouse. It was released August 30th, by the way, so right in time for the Labor Day weekend. But box office wise, there's no information, so I don't know if it did that badly or if it's just like nobody bothered updating the information for this one. So we'll see what happens. No, for Saw 10, I saw the trailer, and essentially Jigsaw is like going to the doctors, and they're trying to tell him, you're sick, but we can give you these treatments, and you should be right as rain in a few months, whatever the case is. Only to find out whatever he's suffering from, they essentially were giving a whole bunch of bullshit and giving him, like, if not like placebos, they were just giving him treatments that they knew to be ineffective. So what does the gentleman of his talents do? He, of course, kidnaps these individuals who screw him over medically, and he decides to put them each in different contraptions or challenges to try to save their lives. So it's either, mutilate yourself or die.
Yep.
So if anybody who hasn't seen any of the Saw movies, a lot of body horror, a lot of, how do they refer to it?
Torture porn.
Thank you. And yeah, it's the one that still gets to me is the woman who had to crawl through the pile of hypodermic needles, find whatever key unlocks the lock or door that she was being held behind. And I don't remember this one specifically. I think it was Saw 2 or Saw 3, was because for the production of that scene, they actually bought all these needles, the hypodermics, and they had them removed from the different syringes. So you just have a pile of it, and it just looks like a pile of needles that she's going to be jumping into. But upon prepping for that scene, somebody accidentally dumped all the needles back into the pile.
Oh, shit.
And to make matters worse, the actress who was going to crawl through that scene, if I remember correctly, was actually pregnant at the time.
Yeah.
So, like, fuck. I don't know how they went about fixing it. I think it might be like a mixture of urban legend and just, cool story for a movie of this nature to release that little tidbit to say, oh, this happened before we filmed the scene. We had to work around it. Whatever the case is, those movies found very creative ways to amp up their storytelling, amp up the fear factor for them. And I remember, especially back in the day, I believe it was Howard Stern was having like amputees, like women models who were like, pretty, but missing an arm or missing a leg, whatever the case was, all in the promotion of the Saw movies, because more often than not, people in these movies lose a limb, lose a leg, lose a hand, whatever the case is, or you lose their lives, story-wise. So it was always weird to get out there, but I'm fascinated by that one only because, again, we've talked about movie franchises that doesn't take much, especially when it comes to the horror genre, doesn't take much budget-wise to make a movie that captures the audience's attention, and then from there you have a franchise, and you're off to the races. I know we mentioned Paranormal Activity being one of those.
Yeah.
Very simple premise, very simple thing. I mean, I'm sure the effects for those are very practical, and it works. Like, it became a very popular franchise for the horror genre. Saw was one of the women. I think they even tout themselves as the most successful horror franchise out there. And again, just that torture porn aspect of it. Some people just can't turn away, and they love it. Halloween, back in the day, we talked about with John Carpenter. You take a very low budget film, go out there. I implore anybody who has access to Netflix, the movies that made us, they do an episode on the Halloween movie and the making of it and how it came together. And you just see just how low budget the movie was, to the point where they couldn't find a pumpkin to shoot for the film. So they had to find some like offshoot version of like, not a gourd, but something else, but like a melon type of fruit that had the same shape of a pumpkin, and they just painted it orange and they shot that instead. So I was like, okay, movie magic, make things work with what you got.
Absolutely. Yep. Make it work.
But it's funny, especially, again, we talk about the recent summer blockbuster bombs, movies that cost $100 million or more and didn't get the ticket sales that they were hoping for. Tom Cruise, his Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, Part 1, was thought to be one of those movies that was going to hit it big. I mean, the sequel to Top Gun was very successful at the box office. And they thought this iteration of Mission Impossible was going to follow suit. Did not. Indiana Jones did not meet expectations. A number of different films just did not hit as big as they thought. And again, we're talking about a different era as far as theaters. This is even before the different strikes. You're talking about post-pandemic, people not really willing to go out, inflation going up, ticket prices a little high, concession prices a little high. What do you do for entertainment? Do you go out, or do you just wait for the, like you just said yourself, like Slaughterhouse? Probably not going to pull you out of your house to go watch it at the theater to begin with, but for just about anything that comes out nowadays, we have a narrower release window. So it's a month in the theaters, maybe a month and a half if they're lucky, and then about 2 months down the line, it's on streaming.
Yeah, exactly.
So why spend the $15-$20 to go to a theater, plus more, whatever the case is, if you have somebody else with you or if you have concessions involved. But from there, why pay the extra if you're already paying for services? You can watch them online, watch them at home in the comfort of your house, and then go from there. Like I desperately wanted to watch Oppenheimer in theaters. I'm not gonna get a chance to watch it in theaters because I think most theaters around here already send it back.
Yeah, that's gone.
Yeah, so that's no more for me. Although I did hear that Barbie apparently is getting an IMAX release.
Huh, no shit.
So if you want to go back for a second viewing of Barbie, but this one's also included. Not only are they giving it the IMAX treatment, but apparently they're also adding post-credit scenes.
I guess. Why not? I guess they're got to get ready for Barbie too.
Bang for your buck, baby. They want to make sure you go back out there and check it out. I'm trying to remember. Oh yeah, it also didn't that one just beat another franchise? We talked about how it beat the Batman franchise back in the day. Or I should say back in the day, back a few weeks ago. Apparently it also beat out now, I think it was Harry Potter.
Really?
I believe so. I can't remember the dollar amount off the top of my head. But in the time that it had its theater run, I mean, it did really well. And even though they've already announced the digital release date, which is I think like a month or two off. So
okay,
if anybody wants to go check it out in theaters, they're going to have the chance to check it out in IMAX. So tack on a few extra bucks to your ticket, or just wait till it comes out, home release. But either way,
yeah.
So being that we were, well, at least I brought up the strike again. How long do you think at this point that strike's going to go for?
I have no idea. I mean, this has been going on for, like you said, it's been going on since May for the writers. It's been, I think it was July when the Screen Actors Guild kicked it off. At this point, I don't know, because I mean, even the studios, like they're talking about, like I saw an article the other day where they were talking about how their projection is, it's like, yeah, we're going to lose about $500 million on this thing because of the delays and other stuff like that. But it's hitting this point where they're so, if that leaked out that they said, well, we're going to have to wait and starve them out and wait for them to come crawling back, they can't show weakness. They're going to have to force it. But what I'm hoping is this actually creates, I'm hoping more people go on strike with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I can see this one reaching into the fall. If they're still going by Christmas, well, shit, I have no idea at that point.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's not going to end until early 2024 at this point.
Dang. Okay.
And it's just from the things that I've been seeing. So we talked about some of the Disney Plus delays. I believe the What If series got delayed as well. Loki is still coming out on track. The Marvels is still coming out on track. That's what it was. Dune, the second Dune movie.
Oh yeah.
That one apparently is going to be delayed until early 2024 at this point.
Okay.
And people are like, what the hell? You put out some of these other movies just fine. Why delay this one? Well, again, you don't have talk shows, you don't have interviews going on. Conventions, although they're still going on, panels are not really allowed to be talking about the different projects that are happening. So why release a movie, especially something of that caliber, of that budget, without proper hype, without proper advertising, and then expect it to make its money back? Again, for anybody who hasn't listened, whenever you have a movie budget, if you have a movie budget of about $100 million, that's the budget for the movie itself. Factor in the advertising, which is about double that, so you're looking at about $3 to $4 million that you need to make back. 3 to 400 million to make back, and that's to be considered a success. The most recent movie from DC and Warner Brothers, Blue Beetle, although it's doing pretty well, I guess you could say due to the adjusted numbers, it's not doing as well as they would hope, and it almost seems like they set it up to fail. So you may not get another Blue Beetle standalone or like a sequel, but the Blue Beetle character may show up in other films down the line. We already know that the Superman Legacy movie is going to have a cast of different characters from the comics, so it's very possible that Blue Beetle shows up there or in other films down the line as a supporting character, or maybe even like a cameo character. But how many times can you put these films out, give them huge budgets because of like special effects and costumes and everything else, but then like, oh, it didn't make 500 million that we were hoping? You have a limited market happening right now, and the limited budget that you're giving it, what do you expect?
Well, part of the problem with that too is we also know that there's some weird creative accounting that goes on for Hollywood.
Absolutely.
We know that every time that they start another film project, it becomes its own little set of books. It becomes its own project that they have to fund. They have to, if I understand the model correctly, they're going to, if, for example, they need to charge $500 worth of, catering to a project. Yes, ultimately that's going to go to the catering expense account, but they also have to have a way to run it through that project so it gets picked up. Then they could say, oh, that $500 was for movie project X or whatever. But we also know that they play fast and loose with what they can charge to the project, because a lot of them stay open for a very long time. I think it was Back to the Future where residuals were shockingly low for how big the movie was, because all the actors just said, it's like they kept telling us, it's like, oh yeah, we haven't covered our expenses yet, so there's nothing we can pay you.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where Hollywood will not show anybody the books. They're not obligated to show anyone the books because it's not publicly traded, so they can basically just sit on that and just constantly sock more and more expenses against that project/movie, so people never get in to see it. Hell, it's probably gotten to the point with a lot of these projects where they're going to need forensic accountants to actually come through it and figure out what the fuck is going on with it.
Yep.
I mean, on that front, did you ever hear the story of why it took them decades to figure out how much money the Texas Chainsaw Massacre made?
No.
Because the movie was partially owned by soldiers in the Colombo crime family.
What? Really?
There was mob money involved in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
No shit.
Yeah, I think all of this just came out in the last couple of years. I've read an article that Bob Briggs put out about it, where they're still figuring out like a lot of the ins and outs of it. But for years, yeah, everything was incredibly opaque because, yeah, a lot of it was done in, you take film accounting and then throw on top of that organized crime accounting, because they're trying to keep everything as quiet as possible because of the tax implications. And of course, their criminals just don't advertise what they're up to, even if it is something above board. And they do like having their non-illegal revenue streams on occasion, because that's a good way to camouflage your ill-gotten gains
Mhm.
from black market. But yeah, as it turns out, like I can't remember the name of the two guys, but two guys, I think they were both soldiers in the Colombo crime family, which were part of the five families up in New York for decades. Yeah, they had put some of the money out for that movie, and that's where Tobe Hooper, I think this came out after Tobe Hooper's death in 2014, 2015.
Was he like a gatekeeper for this information?
Nobody really knows, or if I did see something about it, I'm not recalling right now because I haven't read this. It's been a while since I read this article about it. But I wouldn't be surprised. I think Tobe Hooper got hired by whoever was running, whoever the producer and executive producer was, whoever those guys were. I think they were the ones who were actually the liaisons for the whole thing.
Interesting.
So it's a pretty wild affair when you think about it that way. Because I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, but it does make sense because in that era, the two what were the back in the 70s and into the 80s, the two movies or the two genres that basically just had you what's to say that made you a pariah were pornography and horror, and the mob was definitely involved in pornography heavily. There was mob money. Mob made a ton of money on Deep Throat.
I remember seeing what was it, the movie or the document? No, it was a movie.
It was a dramatization of that movie.
Yes, I can't remember who played the main role, but yeah, when you find out just how like everybody was all in for the movie itself, because at the time it was a spectacle for the adult film industry, but the way it was handled and the way that things were dealt with behind the scenes were very fucking sketchy.
Oh yeah, but a lot of that stuff at that point in time was also gray market because porn was not technically illegal, but you were asking for trouble if you started fucking around with it. So, Tobe Hooper, he was working at University of Texas at Austin as a cameraman. Trying to skim through the Wikipedia article here to see if there's anything I could find about it. Blah, 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 blah. Hooper and Kim Henkel co-wrote the screenplay and formed Vortex Incorporated with Henkel as president and Hooper as vice president. They asked Bill Parsley, a friend of Hooper, to provide funding. Parsley formed a company called MAB Incorporated, through which he invested $60,000 in the production. In return, MAB owned 50% of the profits of the film and its profits. Okay, where is this? I'll have to do some more digging and get back to you on this one because
That's
I
fine.
definitely saw an article about this.
I'm looking at right now. This is berettabiliorum.com.
Okay.
I've never heard of this site, so take this with a grain of salt. After the infamously grueling shoot of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in the summer of 1973, director Tobe Hooper and crew were looking for distribution. Unfortunately, the project had already gained notoriety in Hollywood, and all the major studios refused to even entertain the idea of releasing the film. So, those involved went with the option available, a small company called Bryanston Films. While that did indeed achieve distribution for the film, it turns out that Bryanston Films was affiliated with the mob and operated by Louis Butchie Pereno of New York's Colombo crime family.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Shit. Wow. Okay.
Yep.
I mean, this is not the first time I've heard a story of, the major studios see a film and whether somebody doesn't agree with it because in this case a horror film, or maybe it's got maybe too many sexual overtones, or they just, somebody just has a bad relationship with somebody in the studio system. They're like, oh, we're not gonna pick up your film for distribution. We're not going to give you any additional funding. In fact, we're just going to tell all the other studios not to even bother with you. And then from there, they're kind of screwed. And if they want the film put out, they're going to have to do anything and everything that they can to make sure that they find the funding to get that out. And because of that, that causes desperate moments. And those desperate moments can lead to some really shady deals. And from there, you go from, I just want to be an artist, I want to put this out in my vision, blah, 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 to, I just want to be an artist, but I'm willing to compromise to get the shit out. And at that point, when desperation and art meet up together, some really horrible, nasty stories happen. So, wow, I never realized that Texas Chainsaw Massacre was one of those films that has a shady background now.
Oh yeah.
There's another movie that fucking scared the hell out of me as a kid. In fact, I don't think I've gone back.
Real. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I've gone back to watch those because, and again, going off of I know you're saying it's based off of a real story, or real events. I don't know. All right, so educate me on this. What was the actual event in history that happened that inspired the movies?
The Ed Gein killings in Wisconsin in I think it was 50s and 60s was one of the influences for the whole thing.
Okay. I remember growing up, and it's the one scene where I believe it's the opening scene. I can't remember if it was part 1 or part 2, where they're on the highway and there's a bunch of 2 kids in a car just screwing around.
Okay.
And they come across, I guess it was a truck, and you see Leatherhead pop out with a chainsaw, and he hits the car as they're passing the truck, and the one driver is like, "Oh, hey, that was crazy." He looks over, and his buddy's head just spraying blood.
Oh, you're thinking of Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2.
Okay, well there you go. Seeing that as a kid, seeing Leatherface with the skin mask on and the chainsaw flailing back and forth, and suddenly you look over and your buddy's head's been sliced by a chainsaw. Like, again, those images early on were stuck in my head, and I was like, "What the fuck are you guys watching?" And I ran to my room and played with my Transformers. But oh man, see, this puts a whole different spin. Now, see, I have not really gone back to watch those. I watched the newer, not all of it, I should say. I watched the newer iteration of Texas Chainsaw Massacre with R. Lee Ermey.
Oh, the one from 2003, the remake. Okay.
I saw part of that one, mostly because R. Lee Ermey. And did I watch anything past that? I think there was at least one more. I didn't catch that one though.
Okay, so Texas Chainsaw Massacre is another one where I'm not even sure who the hell owns the rights for it right now, but whoever they are, periodically, if you throw a script at them, they'll probably be like, yeah, you can go make it. Just make sure I get paid, because they put out a couple of hunks of junk. There was the remake in 2003, which was not bad. R. Lee Ermey was the standout performer in that. Like, he really nailed it as the sadistic small town cop that's connected with the Sawyer family. There was a prequel. There was one prequel in 2006. There was something else in 2017. I was pretty much checked out on the franchise by this point. And then in 2021, they put out one that went straight to Netflix that was kind of set in modern times, where they basically even said, yeah, Leatherface is like an older guy in it. And that one deals more with concepts of gentrification, city folk versus country folk, and even actually kind of dips into like the idea of social media and stuff like that. So it's I mean, honest to God, if you're going to go watch any of these, the first one is worth watching. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is worth watching because it's absolutely... Toby Hooper even came out and said number 2 is supposed to be a comedy. It's pretty bonkers. And it's also got an unimpeachable soundtrack. It's excellent. Like, that was the movie... I always joke that you can tell... older people like me got into Goo Goo Muck by the Cramps from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and younger people got into Goo Goo Muck through the dance scene in Wednesday last year. But okay. But yeah, after that, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 and Texas Chainsaw Massacre Next Generation, don't bother. There's a lot of dreck that came out with the entire thing, so it's just one of those deals where I think they're up to like 2 or 3 timelines, so they're starting to encroach upon Halloween territory.
Next Generation, isn't that the one with Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger?
Yes, yes, it is.
I only remember that one because I remember seeing the box of it at Blockbuster, and I was always like, "What the fuck is this?" The last one that you were mentioning with city folk, village folk, or farm folk, excuse me. Was that the one that was Netflix?
Yeah, that was Netflix only. That came out in, I think it came out in the fall of 2021. It was supposed to be a theatrical release, but with the pandemic and everything else, Netflix is like, we'll buy it. So they're like, here, you buy it and just run it on streaming, whatever.
I think I texted you about that one back in the day.
Quite possibly. I remember, I think I watched that on over the winter of 2021 into 2022, maybe. It's been a while. But you know what? It's not bad.
Okay.
There's there's a very good scene where a kind of a party bus full of quote unquote social media influencers, they're hanging out drinking, and all of a sudden Leatherface gets on the bus, and everybody, of course, starts streaming and puts their camera on him. And the one guy was like, if you don't look out, you're going to get canceled. And all of a sudden, yeah, he fires up the chainsaw, and you know what happens from there.
Okay. I do recall that scene from the trailer. Okay.
Yeah, it's not a bad movie. And it's also interesting because I believe it was supposed to be a direct sequel to the first one because the survival girl from the first one, she comes back for that one.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, Marilyn Burns reprises her role as Sally Hardesty in that one, who was the woman who famously escapes in the first movie and is laughing and screaming hysterically in the back of a pickup truck that drives away while Leatherface is like doing the weird dance with the chainsaw in the middle of the road, like at like 6 o'clock in the morning on a hot Texas day.
God. Well, since we're talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, have you played the new video game that was put out?
No, I haven't had a chance to check it out yet. I'm curious. I've heard it's still kind of buggy, but I believe it's Gun Media, who are the same folks who gave us the Friday the 13th game.
Yeah, a lot of people saying it's very, very similar to Friday the 13th or the other game that was competing with it, Dead by Daylight.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you play the killer, you have to get away, whatever the case is. In certain cases, you can be Leatherface himself and chase down all the different victims. But very similar to what happened with Friday the 13th, other things are popping up again where people are asking for certain DLC to be included. So different locations, different characters, stuff like that. And like you were saying, you don't really know who owns the rights to all that, which was similar to what was going on with Friday the 13th between, help me out here, was it Sean Cunningham and
Victor Miller?
Thank you. And that legal battle that essentially ended up killing that game's future as far as DLC or any future development on other subsequent follow-ups. Same thing's happening with this one. They're like, enjoy it for what it is right now, because it's kind of difficult to try to get any other DLC made that follows the movies themselves. They can't say that no, they can't get it, but something might be worked out deal-wise. From what I can find here real quick, and, again, take this with a grain of salt. It says here, created by Kim Henkel and Tobe Hooper, which I believe you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Original work was 74 for Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It currently says Vortex Incorporated holds the rights. I don't know who the fuck Vortex Incorporated is. But
that was the company that Henkel and Hooper formed together. So...
Is that
with Hooper being dead, I'm not sure who owns his piece of it, and I don't know anything about Kim Henkel, to be honest with you. I'm not as up on the behind the scenes of that franchise as I am some of the other slashers.
So what you're telling me is there's a crime boss in New York that needs to sign off on DLC for the next game.
Quite possibly.
Weird. Okay. Again, strange things happen when you get to Hollywood, and in this case in particular, horror films don't have a simple through line all the time.
Nope.
Things happen in certain cases. Again, if anybody wants to go check out the one episode of The Movies That Made Us for Halloween, they talk about the difficulty that they had in finding people to distribute the movie, because especially back then, 70s and 80s, slasher films weren't thing that people were really excited about in terms of Hollywood. Like, oh, it's too violent. Oh, there's a lot of nudity, whatever the case is. People were shying away from it. So it took certain individuals to go out there and find somebody with the cash to put those films out. And once you got to the business side of it of, hold on, this movie only cost how much to make? About $500,000. And you made how much money off of it? About $300 million. Let's fucking do it again. And of course, that's where Hollywood gets involved, and like, let's give it a really low budget, expect really big returns. And when that doesn't happen, like, it's a failure. Can it? Move on to the next one. So,
well, usually they get one or two movies where it's like, okay, if you're not giving us a certain percentage of return on investment, yeah, that's when we're going to mothball for a little while. I mean, It happened with Nightmare on Elm Street after, good Lord. By the time they got to Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, they're like, okay, we're running out of road here. Whatchamacallit, oddly enough, a lot of people think of Scream as like the first meta horror film. It definitely wasn't, but
New Nightmare.
even in that framing, 1994's New Nightmare was meta before that.
Oh yeah.
But then you're not even taking into account any of the stuff from the 1980s, but that's a different discussion for a different day. But yeah, for Friday the 13th, I mean, I have a special place in my heart for Jason Takes Manhattan Part 8, but I'm not going to sit here and tell anyone it's a good movie.
Fair enough. Especially when, the Takes the Manhattan part really doesn't happen. Like, the majority of the movie is on the boat.
Majority of the movie's on the boat, and when they're actually in Manhattan, there's only, I think, like 2 or 3 scenes that are actually filmed in Manhattan. The rest of it's Toronto.
That's right. Yes. And let's not forget his appearance on the Arsenio Hall show.
Mm-hmm.
New Nightmare came out at just about the right time for me to get interested in horror movies, specifically because they were crossing that boundary and into a meta movie when the actress who's playing Nancy goes to Robert Englund's house. No, is it Robert? No, when he goes to Wes Craven's, and they're having that scene back and forth, and as they're having their lines of dialogue, all of a sudden you see the computer screen, and the lines of dialogue that they just spoke out loud is what's being written on the screen by Wes Craven. Like, he's like, I can't. It does it on its own. It's happening. The movie's playing out by itself.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, this is fucking cool. And then the fact that Freddy was not just a nightmare anymore. He was more of like this weird elemental dream spirit, whatever the case was. And that for me just became more creative outside the realm of horror, and definitely got my interest more and more. So that when Scream came out, don't get me wrong, that's more of a satire for horror films, with all the rules and what you shouldn't do in a horror movie and everything else. Like you never say, I'll be right back. You never have sex during the movie, whatever the case is. Those were always fun for me. And I think I mentioned this before, that the most recent Scream movie was a lot of fun because they amped up the way they pull off the different kills. The story takes into consideration all the other movies that came before it. The only downside of that movie was that Neve Campbell couldn't make a deal with the filmmakers because she thought she was, should have been paid more for what she was getting into. And let's face it, again, we're talking about horror movie budgets can be really, really low sometimes. So they didn't have anything to work with, but they said they're open to doing something with her down the line. And they've already said that they're going to do another Scream film. So,
oh yeah,
I've always found those very interesting and fun to watch, especially when you're trying to figure out who it is. But let's face it, the way the writers set those films up is that anybody in that cast can be the killer. So by the time they pull out take the hood off or the mask off the villain, they're like, oh, it's this person, and they justify it in the storyline. It just gets kind of crazy. And at the end, they're like, oh, okay, that was fun. But all right, well, that's crazy. Oh man, the whole Crime Family thing is like throwing my brain for a loop. Now you're gonna make me do a deep dive tonight.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Yeah, Joe Bob Briggs. You remember Joe Bob Briggs, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, he so how he's having a career resurgence right now, don't you?
I've heard he's been doing a lot more appearances and a lot more shows now. Does he still have his own version of whatever it was on TNT?
So yeah, for the folks listening at home, back in 2018, Shudder, which is the horror-only streaming service run by AMC, they decided to do a live stream called The Last Drive-In, which was supposed to be the final send-off for Joe Bob Briggs, because if you remember back in 2000, 2001, they got canceled during the break, so he never got a final episode to say goodbye and basically wrap everything up. So Shudder approached Joe Bob and they said, hey, how about you do this with us? We'll do a 24-hour marathon. You pick the movies. We'll get the licenses for whatever you want. It's all drive-in stuff. And I mean, they were hitting Sleepaway Camp and Pieces and Tourist Trap and, all the normal, everything you expect like that. They ran it in July of 2018. And Joe Bob figured, everybody's probably forgotten about me. This, no, this will be nothing major. They crashed Shudder.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they couldn't get on because it blew out their capacity because so many people were like, holy shit, Joe Bob's back. I'm going to get this streaming service to watch this, and if I like it, I'll stay on. So what started out as the last drive-in that summer, then they said, well, why don't you come back and do a special? I got a lot of the information about the mob being involved with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Was the first special they did was around Thanksgiving of 2018. He did one called Dinners of Death, where they did Texas Chainsaw and the original Hills Have Eyes. So, and then after that, they announced, it's like, oh no, this is going to be a new thing going forward. We'll run seasons. We'll do, 8 to 10 weeks. Each night or each weekend we'll do 2 movies, and it'll be the same format where they'll run a movie for like 20 or 30 minutes. Joe Bob will break in, give you, all the details you ever wanted about the fucking film, but that you've ever wanted. Sometimes he has people from the movies on, so he can sit down and talk with them. He'll tell stories about everything. He's got a new male girl, this woman named Darcy, who's actually an ex-adult film star, and she's quite lovely. She's answering mail and doing the Twitter and stuff like that, and basically being the sidekick and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, they just wrapped up about a month and a half ago, like late July. They wrapped up, I think, the 5th or 6th season. So,
okay, wow.
And yeah, and they run a Halloween special every year because usually they kick it off like late April, and they usually finish it up like sometime in like June or July. And it's pretty cool because he plays everything from the most weird, obscure shit you've never heard of to like, pretty big stuff. Like on occasion he was like, we're just going to do Night of the Living Dead this week and whatever. So it's a lot of fun. And it's also nice because it's very conversational because they have the set worked up. So it looks like they're sitting in front of a trailer. He's always drinking. He's always got a Lone Star beer in his hand that he's drinking. They're just hanging out. Darcy, the male girl, she's really big into costuming. So she's always like dressed up in theme for whatever movie they're doing. So it's a ton of fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you still have your Shudder account or a Shudder account?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
In fact, I gotta take it easy with my Shudder account. I think I've given it out to too many people because on occasion I get a message that says, yeah, there's too many people on this account. You can't use it right now. And I was like, what the fuck?
Password sharing. They're cracking down, man.
Yeah.
Okay. That's crazy. All right. Well, I'm happy to hear that Joe Bob is still going strong, because I remember back in the day when we were watching again the back of the Monday Night Wars, and you would always get those commercials in between wrestling segments.
MonsterVision, baby.
Yep. And then they would also have, what was the dinner and a movie, whatever that cooking show was, that would pop in between.
Oh yeah.
I just remember they had
they would occasionally have like WCW guys on there too.
Yeah, exactly. Like every now and then, you like the little jingles, like beans and cornbread, corn and corn, whatever. But yeah, that's where like Joe Bob Briggs really stuck in my brain, because of all the times he'd be sitting there in his lawn chair, have the beer next to him in front of the camper, and tell you what's coming up this weekend or what the movies they're going to be covering, whatever the case was. And it's like, all right, it's cool. And then I know we talked about the Mahoning Drive-In. Apparently he was a guest there at one point, and he's been doing appearances at other places as well. So it's nice to see that he's still going. And again, horror is like a very niche genre. So if you're doing parts, if you're doing pieces or other movies, Sleepaway Camp, stuff like that, you're not going to grab the mainstream audiences. You're going to get the people that know what you're watching. And from there, like, you've got your audience. It might not be a big audience, depending on where you go, but it's definitely something that will get people's attention. And at that point, you have your little community. And really, that's what we want. Like-minded individuals coming together for silliness and horror films. So why not? But okay.
Hell yeah, man.
I am definitely going to have to do more research on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. See, now you've given me a reason to go back and check out a film franchise that I was like not opposed to, but just terrified me as a young child. So, but having that extra layer of history added to it That's interesting. I wonder if there's going to be any kind of like documentary that comes out about that.
About the mob being involved in that movie.
Yeah.
It would be cool, but I don't know if they have that much information. And number two, they're not what they used to be, but they're still not a group of people you really want to fuck with.
No, not at all. But even then, like, I mean, look, we had well, it's not a documentary, but the story of Narcos for Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
When they were doing that one, essentially they went down and they did the whole Escobar story, and the Escobar family, or what was left of that gang, said, "Hey, next time you come down here, or before you tell the life story of our founder or our leader, whatever the case is, you might want to talk to us, and you might want to give us a little money because that is our story, whatever the case is." And then you had the scout locator, or excuse me, yes, the scout location scout went out to Colombia to look for other stuff for upcoming seasons, and then I believe it was him and somebody else were found dead in a car that was set on fire. And like, oh, that's I believe after that they said Narcos is going to switch storylines and we're going to leave Colombia and go to Mexico. At that point they can get away with it. So that's all to say that I don't think anybody needs all the facts for a documentary nowadays. They'll put out a documentary with what little they can find and then fill in the gaps with speculation here or there. So if it's not a documentary, maybe they'll make like a short series or a short retelling, based on a true story kind of thing.
Yeah.
And maybe you'll get the story that way. But either way, that's a fascinating piece of history right there. So we'll have to look at that one up, especially with, again, starting off September, going to be rolling into the spooky season, see what happens. Maybe we can talk about some more horror related or spooky stuff down the line.
Spooky season is in the heart.
Yes, it is. All right, sir. I think we've done it for tonight. If you've made it this far, I'm off. I'm completely off. It's hot in here. Did I mention that before? If you made it this far, thank you for listening. My name is Eric Hernandez.
I'm Doug.
And we are the Rabblecast.